Welcome to our Systems Innovation Toolkit walkthrough. My name is Yasmin, and alongside my colleague Josh Colchester, we're going to host this 90 minutes event with you. And the main objectives that we have for this workshop is for you to learn about the different canvases that we have available on our website. I'll quickly show you where you can find them on our software so you can know where to find them. And of course, our third objective is to understand the use and the importance of these canvases in the context of systems change. So you can find the canvases here as it's shown. We have a part of our website that is called Toolkit, where you can find the canvases or guides and other important elements there as well. You can find all the information here. And of course, this event is being hosted by the London Hub. And we're going to record this session, and you can find them in our section below. So as it's shown here for you, we have our canvases, and you can access them all right here. Yes. Okay, good. So this event, as I said, is being recorded, and you can find them. In the end, we're going to show you where you can find this recording. Yes. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Josh to start our session. Thank you.
Yeah, so great. Thanks a lot, Yasmin. Good to be here with everyone. Thank you all for joining. It's quite a large group this evening. Maybe, Yasmin, you could share the mirror board with everyone so they could jump in and find, and maybe just put that link to the canvases in the chat also in case people are having challenges finding that. So yes, find all the canvases there, and you'll find the toolkit, which brings all these canvases together in the overall process that I'll show you today, or the method. So 2 bits and pieces there, the individual canvases and then the overall toolkit. Okay, so this is what we're going to be doing today, this big mirror board here. It's a way of representing and compiling the different canvases into an overall method or process. I'll look at that now in the center here, just so we can structure it. We're going to be looking at a lot of canvases. I think we have maybe 30 or more on the website. We'll look at maybe 20 today or so in these 4 different quadrants, right? So we kind of think about systems innovation as entailing or requiring at least 4 different dimensions to it. And obviously this is not necessarily in a linear fashion, but we're saying they're considerations, things that you need to consider when you go into trying to make a systems innovation initiative happen. So up on the left, which we'll be talking about first, is the whole systems thinking and trying to reframe the challenge in a more systemic light, so that we can move away from a partial kind of incremental linear approach to it and start thinking systemically, and then starting to act more systemically from that. So that's where we'll start today. It'll be this quadrant up here, and all the canvases there are there to help the participants start to think more holistically and more systemically about the challenge from different perspectives and derive new insights from that. So that's the first section we'll be looking at. And then the second section up on the top right is around what we call systems inquiry, which is really understanding the system we're dealing with, which involves quite a bit of systems mapping. So that'll be a key part of it, to identify the different factors involved in this, the elements and the relationships between them. Understanding the system really is what it's about, we're dealing with. And then, of course, looking for places to intervene, the leverage points. So that'll be this section up here, and Oh, our board's starting to run away already. Have we got everything locked down? Let's just see here. Maybe move this. Anyway, it's up on the top right there, all the green ones. They're obviously color coded, as you can see. That's better, isn't it? Move down a little bit. Okay, so up on the top right are the all the ones around systems inquiry and systems analysis, and mapping and so forth. We'll be looking at those as we go through. We'll be highlighting what that whole quadrant is about, why we're doing it, and then look at the individual canvases. So that's the second section there. Let me just lock this down. There we go. The third section is around change or transitions. So it's a question of, okay, we're thinking systemically, and we've got an understanding of the system, we've mapped it out. How do we now identify, enable, connect, and develop the new innovations to enable a transition? So this is starting to get into the kind of ecosystem aspect, and how do we bring new innovations together, connect them, and start to develop a new network, a new the next generation of the system, really, to enable a transition. So that's this section down here, all the yellow ones. You'll find these all color-coded on the website, just like this. The ones around transitions and systems change are all in yellow. We'll look at those. And finally, this is a section around systems building or platform building. It's about how do we develop a platform supporting the development of this new ecosystem in its development, its learning, its scaling, and the creation of value and so forth. So that's this section down here. They're all in red, and we'll be looking at those in due course. So that's that. I'll just say these are all canvases, and of course behind a canvas are a set of ideas. So if you're not familiar, on the website we have guides, which are the ideas behind these, and then there are canvases based upon those guides. So if you're not familiar with the ideas around these, you'd want to look also at the guides, and if you just search for them, you'll find them there. They're both freely available, so you'll find them there. Any questions or comments at this time? Everybody happy? Do we know what we're doing? Yep. Okay, great. So let's jump in then. We're going to talk about, just say how it's going to proceed. We're going to go through each section. I'm going to explain some of the canvases. We're just going to look at about 6 in each section. On the website, you may find more. You may find anywhere between 6 and 10 canvases for each section. But we're going to look at those canvases, and then we're going to take a little break in terms of breaking you out into breakout rooms for you to discuss them amongst yourselves in a small group and think about how you might use them, or which ones do you think are particularly interesting or difficult, or whichever it is. So that's how we're going to proceed. Just take another 10 minutes or so of me presenting here before we break you out into your rooms. So to get started, let's look at this first one here. Does everybody have, yeah, people have the mirror link to be able to join if they wish. Okay. So this one here, we're in this section. Well, let's maybe start up here. You can see at the top corner, you can see the guide is here. System Thinking Guide, you'll find that on the website. But the question here is, what are we doing and why are we doing this whole activity in the context of trying to make systems change happen? So what we're doing here is trying to reframe the challenge to think systemically. So we're using systems thinking to reframe the challenge from a systems perspective. And why are we doing it? It's only by understanding the issue as systemic that we can start to focus our attention and resources on systems change. So that's the purpose of doing these canvases. And the outcome should be some kind of a narrative or a new vision of the system and the challenge as being systemic rather than partial. From which we can start to try and innovate on the systems level. So that's what this quadrant is about, and we'll just look at 6 different canvases here, all focusing on different aspects of that. So the first one here is the systems thinking canvas. So this one is trying to help people think in this more systems way, or this more holistic way, should we say. And it's looking at 4 different dimensions to that, and kind of contrasting a more reductionist, analytical or linear perspective of the world, and how we view the world from that perspective. You'll see it here on the left-hand side. Each box has a kind of reductionist perspective. And then we're asking, how do we shift that to this systems paradigm, the more holistic paradigm on the right here? And you can see that for the 4, it does that for each section here. But the purpose of this is for people to have people post up their ideas, or try and look through these different lenses, so that they can understand there are different ways of looking at the system. There is kind of reductionist way, and there is a more holistic way. So we ask them here first, what does it mean to look at the system of interest in a piecemeal way, or a partial way, seeing only the parts? And then we ask them to post up here, what does it mean to now look at it in a more holistic way, seeing the forest instead of the trees? What does this look like? And then we iterate through that exercise. You know, you can choose the system that you're asking them to do this. This might be education, for example. What does it mean to look at it from a more partial way, just looking at the trees? Or what does it mean to look at education in a more holistic way, trying to see the forest? And then again here, what does it mean look from a kind of reductionist understanding of education to a more emergent understanding of it? A more disconnected, shifting that to a connected one. A linear to a non-linear way of looking at this. So that's helping them to reframe. Coming out of that, right, they'd have a new kind of framing of this. Normally we're in this kind of more reductionist way of looking at things, and coming out of this they would hopefully have at least understood a bit more about systems thinking and how they might look at this differently. Potentially they could have a whole new framing coming out of this, of the challenge and the system they're dealing with. So that's one canvas. It's a bit more challenging to facilitate. There's a lot of ideas, quite a few ideas behind that you'd need to understand. So you'd want to read the Systems Thinking Guide, or be very familiar with that before you started. Yeah, it's a bit more comprehensive, a little bit more challenging. A lot of stuff going on there. So that's one of the canvases. Yeah, if you have questions as I go through, might not be able to answer all of them, but Yasmin could keep a lookout. You can also, you know, discuss these with your peers when you go into your breakout rooms. So we'll stay going for the moment. This one here is the context mapping canvas. We actually did an event yesterday. Well, it was similar to this. I'll show it to you later, but let's take a look at this. This one's asking about, we put the challenge in the center there, whatever it may be. Let's say this is plastic pollution or something in the oceans. And then around here, we would post up, what do we think are the immediate causes or most immediate things related to that? This is more of a kind of a mind map exercise where we're posting up all the ideas related to something, but in here we're posting up the most immediate ones. And then outside here, we're asking about what's the broader context or broader set of ideas relating to these more immediate ones here. So this is more the systems thinking stuff on the outside here, where we're looking at the broader context within something, within which something exists. So here we might say, you know, plastic pollution. Well, what are the most immediate things around that? You know, maybe cheap. It's a cheap material for wrapping food or whatever. That's an immediate factor there. But then on the outer circle, we might have something about economics, right? And why people want cheap wrapping and so forth. Or there might be another thing here. Immediate thing would be, you know, disposability. They can throw this plastic away very quickly. And then on the outside here, we might have something about, you know, fast food or you know, no time for preparing food or things like this. They're supporting the broader context. So that's helping people to, it's really an ideation tool where you're not ideation, but mind mapping, I should say, kind of tool where you're putting all your ideas up there and you're exploring not just the most immediate ones, but also the broader context of ideas. So helping people to kind of expand their horizons beyond the most immediate ones. Okay, we'll stay going. This one is a very popular one. We've used it a lot and very useful. It's based upon the Iceberg Canvas that you may be familiar with, or the Iceberg model, I should say. This is called the Iceberg Canvas. And it's also kind of building upon theory U, which you may be familiar with. The Iceberg model is a way of representing issues so that people try to think in a more systemic way about them. It's saying that on the top of the iceberg up here, we just see the most immediate events or phenomena, whilst down below the water, there are actually deeper patterns over time and structures supporting those patterns and mental models down here. So what this canvas is trying to do is help people think about the system on its different levels, the existing system on its different levels. What are the events up here? What are the patterns and trends over time down here? Structures supporting those mental models, so on and so forth. And then to shift over to this side, which is shifting from the existing system to what would be the system that, what would happen if we change the paradigm down here? What would be a future, potentially future mental models that might resolve this issue? And out of that, future structures that might emerge and patterns and events and so forth. So we've used this for quite a few different challenges, most recently around climate change, but others around gender-based violence and so forth. So it's really about helping them understand the existing system on its different levels, particularly getting down to the structures and mental models, and then helping them to think about changing that mental model to a more systemic paradigm and what might emerge if we did that. Okay, I'm not sure. How do you think we're doing for time, Yasmin?
Yeah, we can maybe answer one of the questions in the chat quickly.
Yep.
How do you find out what your relevant parts are when trying to frame a system?
The parts are the elements in the system, they're the things. So whenever you can say there's kind of a thing, then that's the parts. If it's a food system, you know, the things in that might be the food processors or the supermarkets and so forth. So whenever there's a thing, that's the parts. Okay, so let's dig in. We don't have too much time. Hopefully we won't overdose on canvases today. We've got a lot to go through. This one's another interesting one. The elephant canvas is quite simple, this one. So some are more complex, some are simpler. Like I said, this one is more sophisticated. This one's quite simple. Anyone could facilitate this one. It's coming from the idea of the elephants, the blind men. It's a parable that's often referenced in systems thinking about how a group of blind men discover an elephant in the jungle. I believe it's in India somewhere, and they all start pulling on one part of the elephant, and each thinks it's something different because they just experience their part of the elephant. So the one pulling the tail thinks it's a snake, and the one pulling on the leg thinks it's a tree. Another one thinks it's whatever, pulling the trunk. So that's the story, and it's really the idea that when we take a partial view, we only see like snapshots of the overall system. We don't see the whole thing. And in systems thinking, we're trying to see the whole thing. So actually, if we could look from different perspectives, we would have a much richer view of the overall system. So this canvas is trying to help us with that. You use it in a workshop with a group of actors in whatever kind of system. This could be the financial system, for example, and then you get the actors to take a role and each one post up what it looks like from their perspective. So this here might be the regulators, the financial regulators. This might be the consumer down here. This might be the banks and the investors and so on and so forth. And they post up, and then you ask them to switch roles. So you get the people who were the bankers to be the regulators, and the regulators to be the consumers and so forth. And you might get them to do that a number of different times, posting up each time, looking at the system from that perspective and moving them around for them to gain perspectives of that system from different vantage points and what it looks like from that vantage point. Quite simple, quite effective. Ultimately, the hope is that they get that kind of richer experience of the system. It's very effective if you're dealing with the real actors in the system. People who have spent 10 years in their particular role and have never really looked at it from another role. If you get them to move around and see it from a very different perspective, it can be very effective. Okay, that's the elephant canvas. Just a couple more here before you break out. This one here is the reflexive thinking canvas. And it's asking, for all these canvases, you need to understand some of the ideas behind them before you'd really be able to use them. So we have a guide on this around systems awareness and reflexive thinking. And it's really asking about how our mental models, these ones here, shape how we look at the world up here, which affects how we go and then act in the world. In terms of managing and designing, and ultimately how that creates the world we live in. So it's really trying to illustrate, core idea and system thinking about how our mental models really frame and shape a lot of the outcomes we get in the system. So on the left-hand side here of each section, it's saying, what's the current paradigm mental model? And then up here, what's the current view of the system from that mental model? So this is how you'd work through it. You'd start here asking them, what's the current thinking, a current paradigm within this system of the actors in the system? What's the current way they're looking at the system? What are they seeing through that paradigm? What's their current way of acting from that? And what are the current outcomes that they're getting from that way of acting and paradigm and so forth? And then, of course, you go back and you iterate through again and ask, okay, if we change the paradigm, we started looking at it in a more systemic way, what would that paradigm look like? What would we start to see if we did that? How would we start to act in a different way from that new perspective? And ultimately, what would be the new outcomes? So it's trying to help people understand better reflexive thinking, that our thinking shapes what we see and how we go and act in the world. And if we change our mental models, we can get a new view of the system, new way of acting, new outcomes. So it's somewhat similar to this U theory one here. It's just organized in a slightly different way. So it's similar in the sense of having an existing system and asking about the mental models there and what would happen if we change that mental model, what would emerge out of that. Okay, just finally, this last one. This is a really interesting one. We've run this a lot. Me and Yasmin just did it last week, I think. And another quite simple one. This is a really great canvas. Unfortunately, we haven't got the actual canvas here. We've got just the image of it, but it's very similar. Maybe you could grab an image of the canvas, Yasmin, and drop it in at some stage so they can see that. But this is the idea. There is ecosystem thinking and ecosystem thinking. Ecosystem thinking is a self-centered view of the world, where we're looking at things in relation to ourselves. Ecosystem thinking is systems thinking. It's where we look at the things around us and ourself in the world as part of a broader, complex, adaptive system. So kind of an ecology that we're just one part of. And that creates a very different view of the world. It's this idea that we're embedded in complex adaptive systems and constantly interdependent and interacting with other entities within broader systems. So that's a different level of awareness, different kind of thinking about the world relative to this ecosystem perspective. So we can take these different perspectives in any situation. And this canvas will have participants post up on the left here. What does the system look like? There we have it. Yasmin's got it right now. You can see on the left here, we're saying, what does the system look like from an ecosystem perspective? And then we're asking from different dimensions here, different aspects of that. And then you're going to shift and ask them, what does it look like from an ecosystem perspective? So similar to the other ones, all the canvases here are asking people about this systems thinking stuff. And, you know, the bigger thing here is the framing of the system. So we're always asking people, how can we reframe what we're doing to a more holistic systems thinking paradigm, to really start thinking systemically and in a new way about this system? Because of course we're doing innovation here, systems innovation. So we need new ideas, new perspectives on this thing from which we're going to start innovating. And that's what these canvases are trying to do. So maybe I leave it there for the moment, and we'll put you into breakout rooms. What's happening now, Yasmin?
Yeah, so here on top of the purple part of the board, the systems thinking part, we have 4 questions. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to go through every one of those. So you can find one of these questions and discuss with your peers. One of these, which canvas would you say is more relevant to your current field of work? Or it can be, how difficult do you think it would be to use these canvases, and is simpler than others? Or would you say, could you think of good cases for applying one of these canvases? And the last one is, can you just click on the link to the canvas to read more about it? So if you want to just discuss deeper about this with your peers, then you're more welcome to. So yes, we're going to break you into rooms now, and we're going to have 5 to 10 minutes for you to discuss them.
Okay, we're back. Hopefully you had fruitful conversations in your breakout rooms, and we will stay going into the second section where we're talking about mapping and systems inquiry. So here's the guide up here. You can read that. It would explain all the ideas, or you'll find it on the website. Why are we doing this? Well, what are we doing? We're trying to map out the factors affecting the issue and identify the places we may best intervene. So we're trying to understand the system, really. It shouldn't change system without some understanding of it, and systems mapping is a very good way of doing that. So why are we doing that? Well, I think I just said it, right? To understand how the system is working and where we will apply our resources trying to influence it. So the ultimate question coming out of this is, okay, if we understand the system, where are the places we want to intervene? Where should we apply our resources and time and energy if we want to influence and make change happen, the leverage points thing? So that's what we're trying to do here. And these are some of the canvases for us to do that. Maybe this is the most interesting one. It's a relatively recent one. We were using it yesterday. It's a bit like the context mapping one, except for this is really thinking about the factors affecting the system. So slightly different. The other one was more of a mind map in the abstract. This one's asking, well, in the center, we put the challenge. And then the challenge in the center here. And then we're asking about the immediate factors affecting that challenge around here. So this is just a stylized example. It's not a real one. Youth unemployment in the center, immediate factors affecting that, lack of opportunity, lack of appropriate skills in education. People don't have the right skills in education, lack of companies and jobs and so forth, lack of incentives to employ new graduates or young people, lack of work opportunities for those skilled workers, so on and so forth. Those are the immediate things that might be creating youth unemployment. And then we ask about, okay, what's the context supporting that? What are the bigger, broader factors? For example, outdated education system may be leading to this lack of appropriate skills in education, which is leading into youth unemployment. Other things, there might be a mismatch between university courses and industrial needs. That's a factor leading into this and so on. And we post those up all around. You can see on the outside, it has different dimensions to the system. So social factors up here, that might be, you know, education or public institutions, healthcare, media, so on. Over here, economics, finance, commerce, so on. Down here, industrial factors, industry, cities, so on. Over here, environmental factors, water, energy, food, and so on. So that helps us take a holistic view on this issue, whatever it is in the center here. You could be putting any challenge there. And then, of course, the stickies here, you're trying to put them in the appropriate sector. You can see this one's about education, so it goes in that social sector. If it's about business and economics, we'll put it in this section, so on and so forth. And then after that, so that's the kind of mapping dimension of it. We used this just yesterday. I think I mentioned around climate change and putting that in the challenge. I see some people who are here actually for the event yesterday, so they'll know all about this. What we do after that is then try and find the intervention points, the leverage points, should we say, and we look at these different areas and we say, well, where can we intervene? Okay, cost of higher education, we think, is a factor creating the context for this whole issue. So what might we do about that? We might enable on-demand learning via user-generated platforms to do something about this very high level of cost to higher education, which is affecting this, which is ultimately leading to this. So we're asking around here, where are the places we could intervene and do something, a number of different factors that might actually change the context and dissolve the problem. And we'd have to intervene in a number of different places, not just one, because this is a kind of systemic issue. So here's another one. We've got this thing around mismatch between university courses and industrial need. We might create new narratives around the function of education systems so as to make them better matched with industry needs and so on. So that's an intervention point. So we can do a number of those. So you can see a couple of others there. And that canvas is the mapping leverage points canvas. So it's mapping quickly and then looking for intervention points. So it's kind of doing everything in one quite quickly. And it's a good kind of ideation canvas for thinking about what are the key factors and where are the places we might intervene. So I think that's a really good one if you want kind of everything in one canvas, should we say. Yeah, any questions or should I stay going?
Yes, Matthew is asking about the boundary of the system. How would you frame the boundary of the system?
Yeah, well, I guess this canvas down here, which is the model of a system. So this can be very useful. This is not really the canvas, but the canvas is very similar. This graphic is just the model of a system. So we've talked about it, 4 elements, relationships between them. And they form some overall system here that has inputs, it performs some process, it creates a functional output, energy, it also creates a dysfunctional output, it has a boundary around it, and it exists in some environment. So all systems, all the things we're interested in systems change, take this form, right? So an energy system, a food system, a political system, education system, and so on. They're all like this. They all take in resources, have a set of elements, right? So if this was a political system, right, there's or a system of governance, should we say, there's a number of elements there, you know, judiciary and, you know, the administration and legislation and so forth, and they all, law enforcement and so forth, they're all interrelated in managing the public sphere in that country or wherever it is, city. They take in resources, they perform functions, that, yeah, they create some value for society. They exist in a broader context of that whole society, so on and so forth. So that's the model of a system. Where you draw the boundary depends on the system and how complex it is and so forth. Yeah, can't really answer that question in the abstract. So this here is another canvas. We've just got the graphic here, but you'd find it on the website if you followed that one there. It's asking, what are the elements of the system? What's the function of this system? What's the context, the environment it exists in? What are the inputs? What resources it takes an input? What's the actual function of this system? That's a good question to be asking a group of people. Sometimes they aren't always as clear about that as you might want, right? If this was education, you might have very different opinions. People probably agree about what are the parts in this system, right? We know there's people making the books, the curriculum. We know there's teachers. We know there's universities and so on. But what's this whole thing doing? What's the function of the whole thing? that might, people might have different opinions about that. So it can be useful actually in that sense to try and get people on the same page about, what is this system a form part of and what's the function of it? Yeah, so I'll stay going because we are a little short on time. Here's another one, Iceberg Canvas. It's just, this one's the leverage points one, sorry. This one's about just thinking about where are our intervention points in the system. On what level are we intervening? If you're familiar with the iceberg model, you'll understand this. If not, you might want to read up on that. But it's saying, when we go to make or where are the interventions people are making at the moment? Are they on the event level? Are they quite superficial? Are they on the pattern level? They're trying to change trends over time. Unemployment's going up, so we're going to do this to try and reduce it in the next 5-10 years. Is it on the structural level? Shifting employment to on-demand ways of doing employment and hiring and so forth. That's actually, that platform model is a restructuring of the labor markets. Is it on the mental models level? Are we trying to change people's way of thinking about this? We looked at the one for education there, like changing our whole paradigm around what the point of education is. So that's just asking, on what level are we intervening and where could we intervene on those different levels? If you look at the canvas, it would have you asking, are we intervening here on the event level or the structural level? What could we do here or what could we do here? So this one here is a multi-level perspective, which is quite, a bit more complex, this one. And it's getting into the whole transition and change of the system. It's saying, here is the system, the incumbent, the dominant regime that exists at the moment. Certain configuration of different institutions, different actors, and they're serving a function, whatever this system is. It might be transport, right? And we know transport is quite dominated by the car, automotive, personal transportation, and that there's a whole set of actors there. The oil companies, and there's the people providing the tax, and the automotive companies, and so forth, and they're all kind of locked into a system. And the thing here, the idea here is that there are big changes on the landscape level up here. And those changes are going to disrupt this dominant regime here and offer the opportunity for these new innovations down here, these new niche innovations to break into the mainstream, potentially enable a new system. So these big drivers up here, there might be things like, climate change and the need to decarbonize the whole transport industry, for example, or the rise of electric vehicles, or autonomous vehicles, and so forth. So that's getting more into the transition. And this is one quite well-known or prominent kind of framework for representing that. Yep, I'll stay going. Couple of others here. This one's around network, taking a more network analysis perspective on the system and trying to understand it from that vantage point, and asking about what are the, the centrality, which are the most important nodes in this network. If this was a food system, we'd have different actors here, the farms and the processors and the consumers and supermarkets. Well, who's playing a really dominant role? Who's at the center of that network? Where does all the money and all the resources and so forth? We know the supermarkets, for example, play quite a key central role in our food systems. That's one example, asking about the resilience of this network. If we took out one node in our food system, how resilient is our network, our supply network for food in a city? Are there many pathways through we can get food, or are we dependent on a single one? How do things spread across this network? Is it centralized or decentralized, so on and so forth? So that's a network perspective on things. This is more a systems dynamics way of looking at things. Maybe I'll stay going for the sake of time. So yeah, that was looking at 6 different canvases there. They're all about how to map a system, to try and represent it, to get an overview to it, and think about where are those intervention points, those places of change, also? How can we influence this system? And this is kind of the most, the best one if you want a simple canvas for trying to do all that in one, should we say.
Good. And just to remind you as well that you can find the links for these canvases on the image on top of each of these canvases. Yeah, so if you click there, it goes directly to the website where you can find the canvases and the other ones as well. Okay. Good.
Great.
Awesome. And yeah, now we can go to the breakout rooms again. You have the section underneath the green board, below the green board, yes, where you have these questions as well. We're going to give you 5 to 10 minutes as well, so you can have these conversations and understand where you can use it, and general discussions as well.
Okay, we're back, hopefully, and we'll stay moving on. So just half an hour left to cover these last two sections where we're going to talk about changing, systems change, enabling transitions, and then about platform building. How do we support this new ecosystem to grow and scale and learn and develop over time? So this section is getting into, well, let's just recap. We started off around framing all the system thinking ideas up here. How can we really start to think systemically about the challenge that we're dealing with, so that we can then start to innovate from that place and start to innovate from the vision of the system and how we might actually change that. And then we went here where we just talked about how to actually better understand the system as a whole, not just try and analyze and find solutions in some part of the system, but actually get a broader view of the whole system and a number of different places we might need to intervene, different levels we might need to intervene in a coordinated fashion to actually start to try and make some changes. So now we have a hypothesis about the places we might want to intervene and so forth. This next section is asking about how do we actually enable a change, a transition within the system by bringing those new actors together around those places we want to intervene and start connecting, nourishing and developing them into a new network, which will be the next generation of the system. So this canvas at the beginning, quite a complex one. It's trying to capture different aspects of that. There are many ideas around how to enable transitions and how to grow these new innovations and so forth. And this here is one that tries to capture different aspects of a kind of transition process around macro changes, changes on the macro level. There's almost always a big change on the landscape level, and that's leading to new opportunities that the incumbent system can't deal with. So there's disruption going on here. There's crisis going on in transitions. There's always a crisis as one system collapses and a new one starts to emerge. And we always have these new innovations going on down here at the fringes of the system, and the potential for them to emerge and become connected and networked to form the next generation system that might be over here. And the question of then, how do we nurture and nourish those new innovations to really help them grow and break into the mainstream, disrupt the incumbent system, and really start to take us, build a new ecosystem, ultimately is what we're trying to do here. So this one is a big woolly mammoth of a canvas that has lots of different arms and legs to it, and I'll leave you to explore that up there, but let's take a look at a few other ones we've got here. Maybe go down here. This is one of the most popular ones. Maybe you've heard of it, Three Horizons Framework by Bill Sharp. So this one's asking about how the transition process is going to play out in terms of there being these new innovations and there being this incumbent system and there being these driving forces that are disrupting the incumbent system and creating new opportunities. And looking at those three horizons, right? The medium term here, the short term, we know the incumbent system is the dominant one. Innovations are on the fringes. These driving forces are are going to disrupt the incumbent systems. This could be the introduction of cloud computing into the enterprise or into the world of business. It's going to disrupt and transform how we do business. That's driving force. Could be captured in some way by the incumbent institutions to make them go faster and better and make more money, or it could be used to bring a new system into being, right? The internet has brought new ways of doing things, such as Wikipedia, into being. It's also being captured by incumbent, business models and motives and so forth. The likes of Uber and so forth. So this here is asking about how do these forces kind of play out and change over time in the context of transition and knowing that they can go in different directions. Three Horizons Canvas, you may be familiar with that one already, quite popular. This one here is another great one, the Two Loops Canvas. You'll find the guide on our website that'll explain how this works. Very simple, 2 loops. The first one, again, it's talking about a transition process, the old system coming to the end of its life cycle and the emergence of a new system. This first loop is the incumbent system. It's risen up here, and now it's actually in decline. It's going down here, right? So this is most of the systems in industrial economies, right? They're coming to the end of their life cycle. The way we do education, for example, or the way we do, well, healthcare, we know it's unsustainable in many countries. And we know there are also new innovations. So that's the incumbent system there. And then we know there are new innovations, new ways of doing things. This was the energy system. These might be, renewable energies or whatever they are. And then down here is the emergence of the new system, right? And over here is going to be what that looks like when it matures and develops and so forth. And you can see there are about 8 different boxes here asking about different aspects of that. What does the incumbent system look like? What are these pockets of the future? What's the emerging system? What might that look like? And then down here, you can see there are a number of boxes that are asking about how can we help that new system come into being? How can we name those new innovations? How can we connect them? How can we nurture them? Importantly, how can we help the existing system, the one that's falling apart, how can we hospice it? That is to help and enable those people to transition to the new model instead of resisting it and not getting a synergy or conflict, should we say, which is normally the case between these two different systems, but really thinking about how can the resources in the incumbent system be let go of and transition towards enabling the emergence of the new system over here. So that's the 2 loops. Any questions, Jasmine, or should we stay going?
There's a question here. How do you effectively convince stakeholders and academicians about the robustness of the system methods and tradition? This is not based on hypothesis testing.
How can we convince them that these canvases and tools are robust, should we say, or really the right ones? Well, they're all different canvases. Some of them are very tried and tested. This one here, the multi-level perspective, it's used by a lot of organizations to think about large-scale changes in food, in energy, and so forth. And other ones have just been invented recently. So they're all different templates and canvases here. Some are more tested, some not. Let's look at this one. This is another relatively well-known. It's called the Futures Cone. And it's just thinking about, it's a tool from Futures and Foresight to think about the future. But you can see time on the horizontal axis here. So again, we're in this section, we're talking about the transition and taking place over time. And because of that, Futures and Foresight plays an important role where we're thinking about what's going on in the future. How are things going to play out? What are those macro trends? And you can see down here's time, short to long timeframes, and up here is the level of data and certainty we have about it. As we go further into the future, obviously we get higher levels of uncertainty, and it's kind of saying in the short term, yes, maybe we can have planning, because we can have relative certainty and data about the present and short term. But as we go further out into the future, we can't. And our approach to dealing with the future and thinking about it and how we're going to develop and move forward, and what we can know and we can't know has to fundamentally change. Planning will only get us so far. We have to move to something more strategic in the 2 to 5 years. But if we go 5, 10 years, it might be just envisioning what's there. We can't really plan the next 10 years. But if we go way out plus 10 years, we can't see that much at all. It's more about this systems change, the emergence of a new system, and how we bring different parts together to enable that emergence. So it's starting to ask the question, well, what can be planned? What can we figure out through strategy and vision? And what is the kind of systems change that might take, at least 10 or 20 or 30 years to come about through emergence? So again, useful for helping people move away from thinking there's one approach to kind of everything. We can plan out the future, or we can have a strategy for all this systems change, even when it's 10 or 20 years into the future, and recognize the importance of uncertainty in all of this and how it shapes our decisions and our view of the future and so forth. Okay, a couple more here before we move on. This one's for creating narratives. Narratives for change. When we're going to bring people together, we often need a story about why we're coming together and what the world looks like, what are the challenges, how might this transition play out, or at least what's the best course of action in some sense, and a bit of a vision about what the future might look like also. So this is one canvas to do that. You can read more. The guide kind of explains different aspects of that, and then you bring people together to fill this canvas out to create their own narrative for change. Okay, this one here, also the Upstream Canvas. This is asking about, maybe this should be up in the previous section, I'm not sure, but it's asking about, a bit like the iceberg model, where are we intervening, or where are we looking at the issue? On what level? Is it upstream or downstream? So downstream is more the outcomes of the system. We have some examples of this one. I probably should have posted those up. But if we had things like a housing crisis here in the UK, that's a little bit more downstream. Underneath that are more structural issues about the economy and employment and construction and so on and so forth, and how we develop cities and politics and so forth. So that's more of a downstream issue, whereas a midstream or upstream might be like how we're thinking about the world. So the iceberg model, going to the bottom of that. So this might be, well, we're taking a certain approach to politics, or we're thinking about these challenges in a particular way, or responding to them in a particular way. So it's really helping us to think about, where is this challenge in terms of, is it more of a superficial outcome to the system, or is it more fundamental? You can see here, these are the more fundamental things, and it's then thinking about how can we change those on those different levels. Yeah, I'll leave you to take a look at that. Okay, I think we covered that section. We are a bit short on time, so I'm going a little bit faster for that.
Yes, so now just 5 minutes, or maybe a bit less than that, for a breakout room, so we can have conversation and discussion about these canvases.
Okay, welcome back. We will continue on our whirlwind tour of canvases from SI. Okay, so we've just got 10 minutes or so left. Let's take a look at this last section, where we're thinking about how to build a platform for supporting the development of this ecosystem. Key considerations are questions around, okay, we've got this new network of actors, and hopefully we've got them working together a little bit, but we're actually going to have to kind of institutionalize this in some way. We're going to have to support them through a platform, really, and that's going to require different aspects here around how do we assess for outcomes? How do we provide them with the information they need? How do we enable learning in this ecosystem? Is there some kind of technology platform that supports them? So on and so forth. So this canvas here, another relatively new one, actually, or recently developed, Innovation Ecosystem Ideation Template. So in some sense, this is bringing a lot of the stuff we talked about together. And this is it here. We're putting in the center. So this is ideating about an ecosystem that we might want to develop. So this could be, we have the challenge of moving to a circular economy, should we say, in some city, and that's a challenge in the center there. And then we're saying around here, what are the actors we need to bring together to make that happen? And how are we going to get them involved? Why would they want to be part of this and so forth? So maybe some stakeholder analysis or actor mapping to better understand their interests and so forth. But we're posting up there, who are those actors around the challenge? And then on the outside here, this is really focused on what's the platform we need to develop to support this ecosystem. And you can see here questions around, it's actually broken down more over there, but how do we enable learning within this ecosystem around the challenge they face? How do we assess for outcomes? Is this ecosystem developing and growing in the right direction? I'll show you some other canvases now that can help us think about that. How do we enable members to connect? What's the technology platform we might need to support the development of this new ecosystem? How do we enable co-creations and collaborations within this ecosystem between actors around the challenge? What kind of shared toolkits, playbooks or templates or whatever it is these actors might need? And also there may be a question of governance here in terms of the platform. How do we do governance within this ecosystem? How do we share information across the ecosystem? What's the general story we're telling about this? So this, if you look into the canvas there, you'll see there's a number of kind of variations of this one here, some simpler, some a little bit more complex, but essentially this is a really useful tool for ideating, just ideating on the kind of ecosystem you're trying to build in terms of the challenge, the factors affecting that, the actors around that, and the platform you might need to build to really support that ecosystem. It's very high level because this stuff is really complex in nature, but it can help you get that holistic view of all of the different dimensions you need to think about and that initial kind of ideation on those. So that's the first canvas. It's kind of the main one in this section. Others are looking at different aspects. This one here, quite useful as a template for thinking about the different actors within an ecosystem. So we've been using something similar to this in our climate lab, thinking about the different actors we might need to bring together here in the UK to address this challenge of climate change. And ran a workshop a couple of weeks ago with people using this template, and they were posting up on this the different organizations they knew of working around climate change, and you could they put them in the different areas here so that we can see, oh, there's entrepreneurs down here, or design agencies, schools, universities, governments, foundations. So it's getting an understanding of the different actors in that ecosystem and kind of the landscape, should we say. So that's the ecosystem mapping canvas, and let's stay going. This is another one around how do we enable support collaboration within and cooperation within an ecosystem. So it's drawing upon some ideas from game theory about how we best build structures that enable and support cooperation to try and help people move from a kind of non-cooperative equilibrium to a more cooperative one. And it's factors around how do we enable greater peer interaction for people to start to coordinate? How can we create identity for members that connects to their level of cooperation? So these are key factors in communities that enable cooperation. It could be any kind of community. It could be eBay, it could be a small community offline. So there's got to be interaction, there's got to be identity, you can recognize each other, reputation systems, feedback, ratings, and transparency. So this is aiming at the question of, in this ecosystem, how do we support and enable collaboration and try to get to a collaborative equilibrium and post up our ideas about how we can do that along those different dimensions. This here is thinking about kind of platform model. And you can see in the center, there's a core team who are actually going to kind of build this platform. And then there are users and there are exchanges within this platform. So it's asking what are the different parts there? What's the underlying infrastructure provided by the platform? Maybe technology, maybe kind of financial infrastructure in some way, or legal infrastructure. Might just be a physical space, should we say? Who's the team? The core team who's actually going to organize this, but then who are the users and the people creating and exchanging value within this platform, this ecosystem, and trying to understand who they are and the potential exchanges of value there. So this could be like you're trying to take a platform approach to elderly care in your community. Well, then these might be, you know, people volunteering to look at help elderly people. Those are the creators of value here, and then elderly people in need care are the users of that. And maybe your little team is creating some kind of platform, might be technology for connecting these people, so on and so forth. So it's just ideating on the different aspects of the platform you might be building. This one here is around assessing. Well, this one's very interesting, thinking about these two are about assessing the ecosystem, how well it's developing this one is. And you can see at the bottom, it has the kind of lowest level of development to an ecosystem. It's saying down here, the community, the network, whatever it is, it's just a group of people. They're not actually working together. So this could be, you know, here in London, different organizations working around homelessness. We might go in and do an assessment and say, well, actually, no one's talking to anyone. It's just a disconnected random group of organizations. There's no ecosystem here. How could we get to the next level? We're at least getting exchanges between them in some way. And then beyond that, but they're really doing that just to kind of meet their own ends. Up here, we're saying there's real collaborations going on here. They're working together to really be able to coordinate their resources collectively around a challenge, and then ultimately systems change, where we're getting a whole infrastructure of collaboration more than the sum of its parts to really have that kind of ecosystem level function. So it's asking about the level of development, and you could use it to assess the existing ecosystem, and then from there say, well, what's needed next? How do we build upon that? And then finally, this is the last one here. This one here is around assessing the system's health. It's asking, going to the ecosystem and asking how integrated and connected is this ecosystem? Are there synergies between the actors? Are they working together cooperatively, or is there competition? How aligned are they around this challenge? Are they all going in different directions, or do they actually have alignment? What's the degree of agility, flexibility, and resilience in the system? A measure of systems sustainability. So those are all ways of assessing the health of this ecosystem and whether it's actually working together and functioning as it should. So we're run out of time. I'm going to wrap up now. I'll leave it to Yasmin to finish.
Great. Thank you, Joss, and thank you everyone that participated until the very end. And here we have our next steps. This was an overview of the canvases that we have here, but of course we have our next learning lab that is starting on January 11th, and this is a cohort challenge-based learning where we're going to have a group of people coming together to understand these guides and the canvases in the context of a real challenge. So if you found this canvases useful, you can join our next learning lab just clicking on this image that is going to lead you to the link to the registering page. And of course, here you have our social media and Twitter, LinkedIn, where you can keep posted on the events and updates that we have there. You have our YouTube channel where you can find this recording and the previous ones that we had. And here is the feedback. If you can, just grab a sticky and put on this line where you find the answers the question. So thank you very much for participating. We're going to break you into rooms now for you to have this last discussion with your peers. And we're going to see you next in our learning lab. So thank you very much for participating.
Great, well done, everyone. Hopefully that was fruitful exercise. You didn't get overloaded with canvases, and we'll break out into breakout rooms. You can have discussion with your peers for as long as you so wish, and look forward to seeing you next time.